Okay, let's get back to it. So, still in smudge tool. Smudging, smudging, smudging. Smudging. And go ahead and use a big one so I'm not really going too slow with it. Anyway, at any point you can come back and do that as you're working on things. Um, so I'm going to want to, again, have him have a little bit of a texture. I'll show you a couple other ways to do the texture. One would be, I'm going to use the selection tool. I'm just going to do a bunch of sort of shapes as I'm going to turn the side of his throat. They're kind of like, I'm drawing the, just globs, and I'm holding down the shift key so you keep doing more and more selections this way. I'm just gonna, and again, you could feel free to do this on another layer if you wanted to. Okay, I'm going to hide it. I'm going to switch to my soft edge airbrush tool. I'm going to go to a brighter color, but I want to go a little bit warmer and a little brighter. Let's see how that works for us. See how now that we have that texture going on there. I'm going to do a little bit more here. And again, I'm just wiggling with this thing and making little shapes and all that kind of stuff. Hide it. And we're going back in the shadows here, so I don't want to hit it too hard there. And you can do more shapes on top of those shapes. If you wanted to get the sort of little skinny. This is almost a technique that you would use with a traditional airbrush. See, now I have another layer of bright on top of that. And again, if we go, oh, that's too bright. Now you can always use a blur tool too to soften this stuff up. And I'd want to probably go back to my hard brush tool and give me back a couple of little bits. I'm doing like I did before, where I'm just doing a sort of pressing down and doing a shape. Pressing down. So we start getting that whole shape. Let some of these marks drop off. Yeah. Again, now I'm just doing shapes with the hard edge brush. That really now allows me to keep some. Again, I'm just thinking of like really just letting the texture go into most of the highlight areas. Now, if I want to be lazy with this, and it's not being lazy, I shouldn't say that, but if I want to have some texture do this for us, let's go ahead and see what we got here. There's one. I switched to a hard mix, and you'll see how that really kind of works. See, that's pretty much almost like what I had. See, hard mix will give me really hard sort of shading on top of that. If I want to, I can switch to color dodge, I believe is the default. I notice when I do that, I get, it becomes a little softer effect, but the problem is it also is not just the texture, and that's all I really want is the texture. So I'm going to go hard mix, and you could always also go into the depth, and watch what that does. So I've gone into the depth of it. Oops. And that kind of enables me to have a little bit of a softer thing going on, but again, I like the other thing, so tough, you have to deal with it now. Alright, so again, I'm just laying in some extra texture with this. I can put some back over on top of this. Kind of works best, I think, in conjunction with the other things that you've been doing. But again, too, the cool part about having a texture brush is, let's say you need that texture to be bigger, okay, you just scale it up. Because when it gets big like that, then it gives you some nice sort of organic little shapes. I'm jumping back out again because I was a little too close, I think. I'm going to switch back to my regular airbrush. I mean, again, regular soft brush, I should say. Start throwing in some other colors here. Let's don't need that. Get my swatches out. Let's go with a cool gray. The top part of my these are swatches I've had for many years, which is kind of good to have the same swatches to a degree, because then I can take these swatches and move them over to almost any computer, and when I pull them up, if they're too dark or too light or whatever, I know that there's something wacky with the settings, calibration settings on the computer I'm on, so I can usually on the fly do some shifting, so I'm showing you used to how these things should look. But again, we're just going to put some cools in some areas that should be the shadowy areas. And if I do that, then I should do a little bit back up here in that helmet dark area. So I'm going to the hard airbrush, and I'm just going to do some little bit of those texture shapes I did before, so it is consistent. And there we go. It's beginning to look pretty cool. Now let's decide to say that, and it's because it's a change I want to make. I don't like the way this, I think this is too orangey right now. So again, I'm going to go back quick and easy to our selection. I'm going to use that tool that I showed you before. Replace, and go to replace color. And so I'm picking that orangey color. I'm going to drop the saturation a bit. Make it blend a little bit more with what we had going on there. I can even make it a little darker if I wanted to. There. Before, after. Blends in a lot nicer now, I think. It was a little harsh before. Just going to mirror some of that texture in these gray areas here. Just using the hard edge tool. I'm also going to amp up a little bit of some of this neck muscle stuff. I'm going to go to the dodge tool. I'll take it off this texture thing. So I had it still set from that old thing. I want to make sure that, okay. I have it on burn, so it's darkening. I'm just helping to shape things a little bit. As you can see how he's coming out pretty good. That sounded right. He's egotistical, didn't it? Yeah, he's coming out pretty good. But that's not really what I was thinking. Okay. So basically what I'd be doing is continuing exactly the way I'm going here. I'd start with the soft airbrush, kind of block the shapes in, and then start going in and adding the detail. So again, you deal with big brushes to small brushes, essentially. Okay, switch to a hard brush. I'm going to do one of these little straps here. Go a little darker than this. It's going to have a little bit of an edge here. And it has a clasp here for, I guess, if he had some sort of armor that went on top of this. And you could put that on. So darken it a little bit. It also just works to add some texture. Just going over it with some dark shapes. Because it probably would be bring a little bit, some of these in on the top edge. So I get a little bit of that. Oh, this is kind of a thick piece of leather. I can't leave things alone once I see, oh, that part's not finished yet, so let's go do a little bit more of that. Again, this is all just hard brush tool. And again, if you get bored with me talking, just speed on through to the next bit. Because really at a certain point it's following the same sort of logic. Now let's say you want to add some little detail here. You know, like sometimes in some of these pieces that I've seen, you add little accents of detail somewhere and they look really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and just with the brush tool, and put it in black, I'm just going to create a little sort of this kind of a design. A little bit Celtic, but not really. something to add some flavor to it. But it's easier too because I'm doing it a little bit larger, so I'm not trying to do some little dinky thing on there. And yes, that's where I'm going to put it. So grab it. Or I could just take it. Actually, what I'll do is it'd be better to leave a copy in case I wanted to use it again. Okay. I can take it. I need to zoom in a little bit there so I can see what's going on. Now it looks a little chunky, just because I'm holding the control key to skew each one of these individually. That way you can make it really kind of shape. And bingo bango, you got this really sort of extra little detail there, and you can always control the opacity. I'm going to go ahead and merge that down, because then what I can do is, again, when I was talking about going in too close, I am a little too close right now. But that's okay, because I'm showing you guys how to do so. Now if I want to make it so it's like a beveled metal, what's going on? And go back in between some of these darks and give us some shapes. Then it looks like it's really cool sort of fancy thing that either his race or species or whatever has some higher, fancier technology than we would give them credit for. Or he took this off somebody, some poor knight that he dealt with many a moon ago. Let's see how I can leave things alone. And we're not finished with this rendering over here, but I would make sure that there is a shadow from this going on it. Again, just adding a little bit of texture here along this side. Oh, boom, now it's got this like kind of cool little broachy thing. But again, that sort of thing works in a lot of places. Like if I wanted to add some more color texture even to him, I'm going to make another layer. And let's give him some like sort of almost reptile-like markings. I'm just going to fill them with a solid color. Okay, and then we can go ahead and mess with that opacity a little bit. So that doesn't really work, right? So if you click here in the layer modes, and you can just use the arrow keys to scroll through them and see what starts to work. Because I don't want anything that's too strong. But I might just have to change that color. That's interesting. What I did is it's different, so it gives you almost a negative version underneath, which is kind of interesting. If we bring down the opacity of that, nah, that doesn't work. Doesn't look very good. Let's go ahead and keep it going. Usually overlay is a good one. And I'm just going to mess with the color in that layer. The hue a little bit. That's kind of nice. You can mess with lightness and see how you get then these shapes. saturation. It's kind of interesting. Let's say that's what we want. I'm not sure it is, I'm just saying. Right now the shapes are a little too regular to make them sort of like natural markings. You want to roughen up the outside of those. I can just grab the eraser tool, bring it down to one of these hard brushes. And just go along the line. I'm just dotting and just kind of jiggling around on the outside. Letting a little bit come out, that's fine. It works a little better for me. Yeah, that's even better. I like that. Okay. So, or you can again just decide, I'd rather have it be normal or be something else. Yeah, you can even take this shape by clicking and holding the control key. It loads it as a selection. So if I wanted to then just go to the area underneath and just do hue and saturation to it, and get some really nice control there. Or if you wanted to even keep that separate, you just create a new adjustment layer. And that's not even on a layer, so it's not really in that bottom bit. Gold's kind of interesting. Let's see if I can get what I'm thinking of, though. So I'm thinking of more kind of like that, but a little less saturated, or a lot less saturated. And again, you got opacity controls or anything. So I mean, little subtle extra bits like that really make pieces like this too. And if you wanted to, if you went back into this mask, you could blur the mask so it would have a softer edge. I think we are in the mask, so let's go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and see what happens to the texture now. I'll show you on the screen live. I'll zoom in. So if you decide it's just a little too harsh that one way, you can really soften up its edges.